Many of us heard this rhyme when we were very young. Someone sang it to you in a crib. Someone mumbled it in kindergarten. Someone passed it on to their grandchildren. Hickory Dickory Dock, the mouse ran up the clock. The clock struck 1, the mouse ran down. Cheerful, rhythmic, childlike. It seems like nothing more than a simple nursery rhyme. But what if it's just a mask, a playful melody, hiding something much older and far stranger? Have you ever stopped to wonder? Why did the mouse run up the clock? Why right when the clock struck? And what does Hickory Dickory Dock even mean? These words aren't just random sounds. What if this isn't a rhyme at all, but a code, a message, a whisper from the past, a forgotten taunt aimed at a fallen ruler, or the echoes of an ancient counting ritual? Sounds wild, just wait, because the names and events hidden inside this innocent little rhyme will turn everything you thought you knew about childhood songs upside down. This rhyme was never meant for children. Today, Hickory Dickory Dock is almost a symbol of American childhood. It's sung in nurseries, printed in school books, animated in cartoons. But what if we told you it wasn't written for kids at all? The very first printed version of the rhyme appeared in 1744 in an old book called Pretty Songbook. Sounds innocent enough, but even then, the words felt oddly familiar, as if the rhyme had been around much longer than anyone realized. And indeed, one theory takes us all the way back to the year 1658, a time when England echoed not with music, but with musket fire, when a king had just been executed, and the throne fell into very different hands. That's where the real mystery begins. Some researchers believe this rhyme wasn't meant to soothe children to sleep. It was written by adults as biting satire, a mocking verse about a man who suddenly rose to power, and just as quickly ran from it, like a mouse, scurrying down the clock the moment it struck the hour. But before we step into the political storm of the 17th century, let's go even further back, because this rhyme has deeper roots, older, stranger, and just as thrilling. Each version leads us down a different path, like a hidden trail in a dark forest. Each one ends with a surprise, ready to follow the mystery of the clock and the uninvited guests with tales. Let's travel to the southwest of England, to the ancient city of Exeter. There, among narrow medieval streets and weathered stone, rises a cathedral that holds one of the most mysterious timekeeping devices of its era. Back in the late 15th century, while Christopher Columbus was still preparing for his great voyage, Exeter Cathedral already had an astronomical clock ticking inside its walls. But this wasn't just a clock. It was a technical marvel. It showed not only the hour, but also the phases of the moon, the current date, even zodiac signs. Its bells rang every quarter hour, and the great Peter bell above thundered through the city like the voice of heaven itself. But this masterpiece had a problem, a small, persistent, and surprisingly clever enemy: mice. They crept inside, lured by the rich scent of the grease used to oil the clock's gears. Quiet and nimble, they climbed the long ropes and pulleys that regulated the mechanism. Their tiny paws disturbed the rhythm of the gears, as if time itself had started to stutter. Something had to be done. So the church found a very practical solution. They hired cats, not as a figure of speech, but officially. The cathedral's records from the 14th and 15th centuries show regular payments of 1 penny per week to feline employees. In some years, 2 cats were on the payroll, and their salary was doubled. These furry workers lived inside the cathedral, guarding the sacred clock from whiskered invaders. And in the year 1598, something truly curious happened. One of the bishops, Joseph Cotton, ordered a hole to be cut into the thick oak door that led to the clock chamber. The reason? Simple: to let the cat come and go as it pleased. That little hole is now believed to be the oldest cat flap in England. And yes, it's still there, right in that very door, where centuries ago, a striped guardian once slipped through to chase time's enemies. Sounds like a fairy tale, doesn't it? So, could this be the inspiration behind the rhyme? A mouse, a clock, the striking of the hour. It almost fits. Almost. But here's where things get strange. Why doesn't the rhyme mention the cat at all? Why is all the focus on the mouse and the clock? And most of all, what does Hickory Dickory Dock even mean? Maybe this rhyme isn't about real rodents at all. Maybe it's about something else entirely, a counting system, a magical chant, or even a fragment of an ancient language, lost to time, with only the melody left behind. Shall we keep digging? In the next chapter, you'll discover how sheep counting and old Celtic incantations may have transformed into a playful nursery rhyme. Could the secret lie in counting sheep? At first glance, the words Hickory Dickory Dock sound like pure nonsense, childish gibberish, nothing more. But if you dig a little deeper, a very different picture begins to emerge. Folklorists Iona and Peter Opie, who dedicated their lives to studying English folk traditions, noticed something curious. The rhythm and sound of this rhyme echo an ancient counting system once used by shepherds. Yes, by those same shepherds who watched over their flocks on the misty hillsides of northern England, especially in the Lake District and Yorkshire. Back then, people didn't count with 1, 2, 3. They used a strange, almost magical language. Yan, Tan, Tithra, Methera, Pimp, Sethera, Lethera, Hovra, Dovera, Dick. And here's where it gets interesting. The words Hovra, Dovera, Dick mean 8, 9, and 10. Coincidence? Or maybe a clue? This peculiar system of counting came from ancient Brittonic and Celtic languages, like Cumbric, a language that mostly vanished by the 6th century, but somehow it survived. It clung to life in rural traditions, in shepherding, and later in knitting, where women counted stitches in that same old dialect. Picture it. A cold night, wind sweeping across the moors, a shepherd sitting by a fire, murmuring numbers under his breath to stay focused. And that chant, soft, repetitive, becomes something more, almost a spell, almost a lullaby. Some say this is exactly how the tradition of counting sheep to fall asleep began, not by accident. That gentle, hypnotic rhythm can quiet the mind. Centuries pass. The language fades. Shepherds give way to factory smoke and steam. But the rhythm remains. The words begin to change. Their meanings are erased like chalk on a slate. But the melody, somehow, survives. So could Hickory Dickory Dock be a remnant of that ancient counting ritual. A rhythmic chant passed down through generations, with grandmothers repeating it to sleepy children, never knowing they were echoing the voices of a pre-Christian world. It sounds mysterious, almost mystical, but even this is only the prelude to the most intriguing version of all. Because there's one more figure in this story, not a mouse, but a man who climbed the clock and fled the moment it struck. Want to know who he was? The mouse was a man, and his name was Richard. Now, here's where things get strange. If you look closely at the old engraving from the very first printed edition of Hickory Dickory Dock, you'll notice something that sends a chill down your spine. In the doorway beneath the clock stands not a mouse, but a tiny man, hunched, wrapped in a short cloak, his face frozen in fear. He seems caught between running away and daring to stay, while the hands of the clock rise toward the moment of the first strike. Who was he? Why is he running? And what do those curious words, Hickory Dickory Dock, really mean? To find the answer, we have to leave fairy tales behind and step into history. The story begins in one of England's darkest and most turbulent eras. After the bloody Civil War, when the nation was exhausted by chaos and grief, a man named Oliver Cromwell took the place of the executed King Charles I. Stern, iron-willed, unshakable, Cromwell wasn't just a general. He was a man possessed by his vision of a purified England, freed from monarchy and sin. He became the Lord Protector, the ruler of the realm without a crown, a man whose power rested not on bloodline, but on fear and force. But history has a way of tiring of iron hands. Cromwell died in 1658, and almost mockingly, he named his own son, Richard, as his successor. And here the tale takes a turn, the kind of twist that folklore loves to remember. Richard Cromwell was the opposite of his father, gentle, soft-spoken, even shy. He loved his family, the quiet of the countryside, the peace of ordinary life. He didn't crave power, and power sensed it. He took his father's seat, but he couldn't hold it. The army, used to the harsh discipline of the elder Cromwell, quickly turned against the son. His rule lasted only 9 months, 9 short months, and the mighty republic began to crumble. Richard broke under the pressure. He ran home, like a frightened child abandoning his toys. And when the monarchy was restored, when the executed king's son, Charles II, reclaimed the throne, Richard fled England forever. He lived abroad under false names, hiding from revenge and from ridicule. Meanwhile, the remains of his father were dug up, hanged, and displayed in disgrace outside the Tower of London. And Richard, the mouse who fled the clock, became a joke across Europe. People called him Tumbledown Dick, Richard who fell. And soon after, another nickname appeared, sharp and mocking, Hickory Dick. Coincidence? Hardly. Now try hearing the rhyme again with that story in mind. Hickory Dickory Dock. The mouse ran up the clock. The clock struck 1. The mouse ran down. The mouse was Richard, climbing toward power. The clock struck. His time was up. And the mouse ran down. His rule was over. Suddenly, this rhyme doesn't sound so innocent anymore. It's not a lullaby. It's satire disguised as play. A warning about a man who couldn't bear the weight of power. A reminder that time always reveals who runs. When the clock begins to strike, a rhyme or a mockery, or maybe a hidden story. Now that we've followed this path, from Exeter's ancient clock to the power struggles of the 17th century, it's time to ask the real question. What does this rhyme actually mean? We're left with 3 vivid, almost unbelievable theories, and each one makes sense in its own way. The first, the most literal, a tale of mice climbing through the inner workings of a medieval clock, drawn in by the grease, disturbing the gears. Tiny, furry intruders who forced the church to hire cats and carve out a cat door, possibly the first in history. Why not turn that into a playful rhyme to entertain children? The second, deeper, stranger. It speaks of ancient counting chants, once used by shepherds on the windswept hills of pre-Christian Britain. Melodies with no direct translation, only rhythm. Yan, tan, tithra, hovera, dovera, dick. Words that sound like a spell, like the whisper of centuries past. Perhaps the rhyme grew from this. Its meaning lost, but its hypnotic pulse still alive. And the third, the most human, and the most painful. A man who couldn't carry the weight of power. Richard Cromwell, who inherited the highest office, and then ran from it. A story of collapse, of shame, of a joke turned into verse so no one would forget. The mouse who climbed the clock, and vanished when it struck. Which version speaks to you? Which one feels true? Or maybe all of them do? Because real legends often live at the crossroads of truth and myth. Rhymes like Hickory Dickory Dock aren't just nonsense for children. They are cultural fingerprints, memory hidden in rhythm, codes wrapped inside games, passed from one generation to the next. We think we're repeating meaningless words, but maybe we're listening to time itself. And maybe that's why, as adults, we begin to hear fairy tales differently. Where a child hears a funny little verse, an adult hears irony, mystery, even sorrow. So next time you hear that familiar childhood rhyme, don't brush it off. Listen, because who knows? The story hiding inside those words might be one you haven't heard yet.